Hi, everybody. It's good to see all your faces. Good to see all your faces in one place because we kind of get spread out here a little bit. I am really happy to be talking with you today about braving the job search and rocking your algorithms. I'm, glad to be doing this for a number of reasons. One is I'm in this process too, and I want to share some things that have worked for me. I hope this is useful to you too. And throughout, I'm going to be sharing some tips and some tools and things. And I really invite you to map what I'm saying onto your own experience. I'll be asking you to do that. I call it braving the job search because searching for a job is an act of courage. I say it's an act of courage to put yourself out there amidst the complete uncertainty of what will happen, and to keep going again and again when you send in an application and maybe you don't hear back, or you do hear back, you go to a job interview. It's just this process where it's continually calling you to be your best self amidst complete uncertainty and unpredictability. And I invite you to just let that sink in, that searching for a job is searching for a job. It's what you came here to do ultimately, but it's really an act of courage. So this is a hat. It's not just any hat, it's a coach hat. Some of you know that before coming to the Guild, I was working full-time as a life and leadership coach. And so I'd like to ask this morning if you will allow me to put on my coach hat and be your coach for the next 60 to 90 minutes. Yes?
I want to see your real hat. Only if it's a real hat, yeah.
I wear a hat. Yeah, right. I really like the top hat though. I like the idea of like a, I think it is.
We're gonna need a monocle.
The funny thing is, this showed up differently on my computer like 5 minutes ago. It was like the emoji version, and now this is like a different kind of black and white top hat version. Anyway, if you'll allow me to be your coach. And a coach is someone who stands on the sidelines as someone else is playing the game and supports that person to do something that they hadn't done before, to overcome something that has been in their way. And so me being your coach is just giving you that invitation that out of this, you might apply something that we're talking about to do something that you hadn't done, or do it in a way that you hadn't done, or to move past a place that you see you've stopped yourself in the past. That's what coaching is about. So take a moment and think to yourself, what is something that you are currently dealing with when it comes to your job search? So some of you may be actively job searching, and you may be dealing with, I've sent out 100 applications and I just haven't heard back. Or maybe you haven't started yet and you're concerned about what will happen when you do start. Whatever it is, just take a moment and think about, what is something that I am currently dealing with when it comes to my job search? And then I'll just, in a minute, I'll ask for a couple people to volunteer.
Not wanting a job.
Okay. Not wanting a job. Who else? Say a little more about that.
I haven't really. I think it's. I have high hopes for working as a coder, but I haven't really had it. I've never had a job I've really enjoyed. I've never had a job I've enjoyed.
Oh, okay.
I mean, really, they've all been pretty mind-numbing, and some of them were like decent jobs, you know, and jobs that people like, but I haven't. So I think there's something inherently like extra hard for me doing a job search because I like deep down just don't even want a job. I want to work for myself eventually. But, yeah.
Got it. Thanks. Who else?
Feeling like I'm not prepared, I guess. Lack of preparation on just all the information that needs to come together. So I want to have everything together so I can just like, yeah, you know, take that. I did everything. So I don't feel like I'm there yet. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, Stephanie.
I have a huge fear of whiteboards.
Okay. Huge. We got to get this one out of the space then. Huge fear of whiteboards.
I have to practice. It's not an excuse, but I'm left-handed, and so I haven't quite figured out how to hold the marker where I'm not smudging everything I wrote, and where I can still see what I wrote. So
Yeah.
it's not up, because then I smudge whatever's above it. If it's down, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yep.
Yeah, or possibly hanging upside down where you
There you go.
Handstand.
There you go. Yeah, thanks. One or two more. Yeah, Alex.
Lack of experience.
Okay.
Knowing that requires like having projects, like being project heavy and not having that. So.
Got it. Yeah.
not having a solid portfolio to show the work that I've done.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yep. I appreciate you sharing all of these. And you see that many or most of us are dealing with something when it comes to the job search. You know, and maybe you heard something that you said, oh, I'm dealing with that too. Not feeling prepared, maybe. So I want to offer a tool that is something that will help us see what's going on when we're applying for jobs, when we're in the job search, and particularly when things get tough. And it's called the playing field. So the playing field is, I'll say it this way, we live our lives on the playing field, this tool. We live our lives on the playing field. And this is a framework that's going to help us understand what happens when we go for a goal or an idea that's important to us. And a goal might be, I get a job by such and such date. So again, map this onto your own experience, this tool. As I'm talking about this, think about how have I experienced this myself? So imagine that reality is divided into two aspects here. There's visionary reality, and visionary reality is the realm of ideas and dreams and vision and intentions. You know, the energy is light the energy is high in visionary reality, you know, and it's easy to do things in visionary reality, to dream up something right away. And the other aspect then is physical reality, which is the domain of people, places, and things. You know you're in physical reality if it's measurable, right? And in physical reality, things take energy, and they take some specific kinds of energy. So time, you can think of as a kind of energy. Things in physical reality take time. They might take money. They might take your creativity or your physical vitality, your actual body. And actually, in most cases, things in physical reality take more than one type of energy. So physical reality, things take energy. Also, so these are the rules of the game of physical reality. Number one is things take energy, these specific kinds of energy. Number two is things are always changing. Have you noticed this? Things are always changing. And not just changing, but changing unpredictably. So these are the 3 rules of the game. Things take energy, things are always changing, and things change unpredictably. And if you notice, those are the same 3 qualities of any game. You know, you think about any game, whether it's tennis or chess or badminton or, I don't know, curling. Any of these things have these same 3 properties. They take energy. The circumstances are always changing, things are always changing, and things are unpredictable. And in fact, it's what makes it a good game. It wouldn't be very interesting if things weren't changing or unpredictable, and you watched Olympic curling and you were like, it just happened and you're done and goodbye, right? It's exciting because it's unpredictable. And I think we forget sometimes the game-like aspect of life, that we're really in life in those same set of circumstances where things take energy and are changing and are unpredictable. It doesn't mean it's always enjoyable, but you can see life as a certain kind of game, and that's why we talk about the playing field as where we live life. So, too many windows. So this is kind of small, but say you have an idea. So an idea would be something in visionary reality. I want to give a talk at a JavaScript conference, right? It's kind of exciting. It's energizing. You've probably had this idea because there's something about it that kind of lights you up, like, whoa, that would be fun. So you're thinking about that, and the energy is kind of high, and then you start thinking about the things that it's going to take to do that. So first, I need to find which conferences are coming up. I need to network to make a connection with the conference leaders. I need to write up a proposal. Shoot, I need to decide exactly what I'm going to talk about. You know, I need to figure out how I'm going to get there. Is it going to cost me money? Da, 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 da. And if you notice your energy kind of dropping as you read that list, that would be normal. It's kind of like a balloon. Like if the balloon was inflated down here when we were talking about, oh man, I would love to speak at a JavaScript conference. As soon as you start looking at what is it going to take to do it, it's like the balloon deflates a little bit. You follow me? And there's a name for that experience, which is trouble at the border. Trouble at the border between visionary reality and physical reality. And I've got a slide to show that. Little red squiggly, that's trouble at the border. Trouble at the border is the experience we have anytime we go to take something from visionary reality into physical reality. And you can think of it as the normal, natural pushback that we experience. Do you know what I mean when I say pushback? That normal, natural pushback when you take an idea and then all of a sudden you're thinking about everything it's going to take.
Like you're talking to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, trouble at the border is the place where we tend to talk ourselves out of things. Like, I don't know about this one. Or your mind might say something like, I'd turn around if I were you. Or, you know, we tried this once before, and you remember how that went. Is this sounding familiar? Are you noticing any of these conversations for yourself? I'm asking you to do something interesting that we don't always do in talks like this, which is to look at what it is that your mind says sometimes. What it is that your mind says when you're going for something important to you. Because if you see what your mind says, you can then make a choice about whether or not you want to believe it, whether or not you want to buy what your mind is telling you. Because doesn't it happen sometimes that we get to the border with an idea or a dream or a vision, and we hear something say, I would turn around if I were you, and we do. Or is that just me?
No,
Am I the okay? Just checking.
It happens every day, man. Every day.
Mm-hmm.
At least once an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, people get stopped or stuck, or they turn around altogether. And so one thing I would love for you to take away from this is the ability to use this tool to not get stuck at the border. And, there's actually a third thing that we do sometimes at the border. Sometimes we'll get stuck. Sometimes we'll turn around. And sometimes we just push our way through. Head down, we just kind of ram through and muscles clenched. And we're just like, I've got it. And we get to the end and we're totally worn out. And so this is about crossing trouble at the border with a modicum of ease so that you can get to where you want to go, something in physical reality, and have enough energy to enjoy being there. So one thing to know about trouble at the border, it's kind of like a rocket launch. This is the Falcon Heavy that launched, February 6th? I actually just watched a video of Elon Musk watching the launch. And I started crying, and he started crying. And this is like, we were all crying. I mean, he was, this is a guy that has dreamed all of this up. And here he is watching the moment where 100,000 things could go wrong. He actually said this in the video. He's like, as the engineer here, I see this, and what I see is 100 or 1,000 ways that this could go wrong, and the kind of magic of when everything goes right. And it's just an incredible experience to see. But so, Falcon Heavy or another type of rocket, being at trouble at the border is a lot like a rocket launch, where you're pushing against gravity and inertia. I heard a statistic, and I'm not, you can fact check me on this, but it's that a rocket uses 90% of its fuel in the first 3.5 minutes after launch.
That is true.
And when I say that, you kind of intuitively know that that's true in the metaphor, right? In the way that we're talking about it in our lives. That don't things sometimes take about 10 times more energy than you think they will? I mean, can you think of a time, probably recently, when you set out to do something and you thought it would be a snap, and you look back and you spent way more time or way more energy or way more money on it than you thought you would? So please expect this.
So cute.
Expect this when you're at trouble at the border, that not only are you entering a domain where things are changing and they're unpredictable, they take energy, but it's going to take probably 10 times more energy than you think it will. And if you go in expecting that, it's not so bad when it does. So for a job search, you may need to do any number of things. You may need to prepare your resume, write cover letters, reach out to friends, go to networking events, practice algorithms, practice interpersonal questions. This is a good thing to do. Fill out online application forms, complete coding challenges, reach out to a friend of a friend of a friend who knows a friend at, Facebook, these sorts of things. And if you read this list and there's like a little bit of a inside, You know you're in the right place. You know you're in the right place. There's trouble at the border. So, as if this weren't enough, reaching trouble at the border always has the effect of giving rise to an internal self-limiting conversation. It just always does. That when we're there, our mind gives us the juiciest self-limiting conversation it can about what might go wrong or what's not working or something about me or something about others. You know, it's the way the mind works. It's not you. It's not something wrong with you. That's the way the mind works because it's always trying to keep us safe. And when you're entering an uncertain environment where things are changing, it's going to look for what might go wrong so you can avoid it. But sometimes that part of our mind goes into overdrive, and it gives us things that it sees as a threat, which when we look at them really aren't a threat. You know, in the same way that 100,000 years ago, you walk out of a cave and there's a saber-toothed tiger that might eat you, right? There aren't so many saber-toothed tigers around. And yet our mind is still not substantively different from the mind that people had 100,000 years ago. It's always looking for the saber-toothed tiger or your ferocious animal of choice. So take a moment. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Did you see the animation? Okay, so here we are, trouble at the border, and whoop, I'd turn back if I were you, and it kind of spins. Yeah, right. So let's see, what did I have next? So take a minute, and I want you to turn to a partner. So partners, you know, turn to the person next to you and talk with your partner about a time you see you were at trouble at the border. It doesn't have to be the biggest time. It doesn't have to be the worst time. But just talk about a time when you notice that these things were going on. You know, things, you were taking an idea into physical reality and you hit trouble at the border. And you'll have about 4 minutes. I'll call you back. So go ahead and both people share.
I'm still on this border since I came here. It's gonna be 5 years soon. And I still
I guess maybe I kind of also it's more about just getting out of bed in the morning. Really, I mean, I feel pretty. Yeah, just so much harder.
A lot of these, I don't know. But
I don't feel I'm often just immobilized. Yeah, but I guess
because your mind is telling you to focus, you got to write and do. pressure.
When was the last time you that's not horrible. But if you get to the simulation, you can stay out of it for as long as you want. That makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
1 minute. 1 minute left.
And have you been in the Bay Area? Sorry. What part of what's the town?
Okay. Okay, come on back. So, what did you notice? What did you notice?
Not alone.
Not alone.
Yeah, because you're like in your own head the entire time.
Uh-huh.
And then when you have a dialect with someone else, it's like, oh, okay, you too. Wonderful. Yeah.
What's, Lataria, if I can ask you, what's something that you noticed about trouble at the border for yourself?
I skip the border and go straight to the job. So like you're like job search, I'm thinking about on the job, me getting called out as like being fraudulent, like not knowing enough. And it's like, well, first you need to apply, but I'm like, no, but when I get there, I'm going to be thrown into the wild and, you know, just exposed for not knowing enough. So yeah, I told him about that. Like I just, jump 20 steps.
Getting ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Who else? What did you notice for yourself about trouble at the border? Yeah.
I'm a border jumper too, except I just go all in. I don't like, it seems like I just got here. So it seems like most people, like not most people, a lot of people think it through beforehand and then it turns into this thing. I don't think it through and I just run into it and then I end up like, because my perspective is so like one-dimensional, I end up like breaking my leg running through the border or something like that. And then that's when I'm like, I can't do this. I ran into my first challenge. I didn't think this out. I'm not good at this. I'm not good at thinking things out or thinking things through. And I just inch back across. And that's when my paralysis sets in, the first challenge that I run into, like in real life though.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you're talking about internal challenges and some physical challenges, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Who else? What's something that you noticed? Yeah. Alex.
Well, I guess for my voice that comes up, it's often like worrying how I'm coming off and just like making this big assumption that I'm coming off super weird and like, and there's just gonna be all this judgment toward that. And that's like what prevents, that's the dialogue that goes on until I finally like just do the thing and then I'm like proven wrong. And then just sharing that with Jen is like same exact thought process that just like making the assumption like, oh, they're gonna think I'm so weird, like so awkward. And yeah, I don't know. That's pretty common, I guess.
Raise your hand if you notice that your mind, when you're at trouble at the border, goes to how I'm coming off. How people are thinking of me. You are not alone. Who else? One or two more. These are great, by the way.
I feel like for me, it's, you know, particularly with looking at job ads, I'm looking at them like, oh, you know, like, this is too many requirements. Like, there's no way that they'll ever pick me. Oh, I don't have to write this cover letter. You know, and it's like, actually, I should be writing the cover letter anyway.
Yep. Yeah, I loved from Cameron's talk. I think she was mentioning that job requirements are specifically calibrated to be like pretty rigorous, and they say you must be this, and you must have 17 years of this, and you must do this and this, and that a lot of companies don't actually expect the people applying to have all of those skills or to have all of that experience. And yet, when you sit there and you look at the job application, the requirements and everything, isn't it so common for the mind to say, can't do this one. Not a fit, not going to work. They're going to write me off right away. Why even spend the time to write the cover letter?
And then it's almost like this little bit of relief. I'm like, okay, I don't have to do that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, Carla.
Can I add something to that piece?
Uh-huh.
Something I've heard is that there also tends to be a gender disparity in who applies for jobs that they don't have all the that they don't check all the boxes of qualifications for, and that many of us who were socialized female tend to take those requirements a little more at face value and say, oh, if I don't have 100% of these boxes checked, I shouldn't submit an application. I can't turn it in. Whereas folks who are socialized male tend to be more likely, that's not the case for everybody, but tend to be more likely to submit an application if they have 75% or 80% of their requirements. And I got my job at Lernersville despite the fact that it said in the job description that you needed to know how to code. And I was like, well, let's see if that's really true. Turns out it wasn't.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's a trip. What's that? Yeah, Stephanie.
It's just like a lot of it reminds me of I'm a doula, so I help women have babies, and it's like birth. It's like
yes, it
women
is.
are in labor, and they call it a transition. So like women have to get to 10 centimeters to push a baby out, and usually they're okay. They can handle the contractions until about 7, and 7 is when they hit a transition. So contraction looks like it comes up, it peaks, and it drops right back down. And so they're like, oh my God, okay, I'm fine. When they go to transition, it goes up and it stays, and then it comes down. And that's when every woman is like, I can't fucking do this. Get the baby out of me, give me some epidural, give me something. This is fucking insane. And it seems like a lot of times like we go through that. We're just like, okay, I can handle this. Okay, here's another hill, here's another hill. And then we hit the transition and we're like, what the fuck? I can't like there's like all the doubting, everything kind of hits, and you're like, I need an epidural.
I'm so glad you said that. Yeah. I mean, it's totally true.
You gotta have the baby. You can't stop in a transition.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever you're going through, you still gotta go through it and get to the other side of it.
Yep.
Just out of curiosity, do they usually get through that without the epidural, or do you?
Sometimes it's too late. By 7 centimeters, it's too late to have an epidural.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're going. It's just like they just don't think. I mean, when pain goes like that and doesn't, it's like, yeah, that's when you have to figure out your inner warrior.
In the war.
Yeah, this practicing the skill of asking the question, where am I on the playing field right now? This is one of the just essential skills with this. This is the tool. The skill is asking the question, where am I on the playing field right now? And asking that question gives you the opportunity to see that you're at trouble at the border and to call forth, how did you put it, your inner warrior?
Inner warrior.
Yeah, to call forth your inner warrior, or what was the term that we were using for the innate qualities? Neandra did. Inner resources, exactly. That those are available to you at any time. You just need to know, is it time to call them forth? Sabrina, did you have something?
Yeah, I don't know. I was going to say that I've learned that with trying new things or trying to grow in new directions, like the one thing for me that resonates is like, I can only grow as much as I'm willing to support myself through growing, if that makes sense. And I kind of think about it like, there's this like philosophy of like being the observer for yourself. And like kind of separating myself into two, or even just asking like, if my friend was trying to do what I was trying to do right now, like how would my friend support me? How would I be my friend and support myself? And whether that's reaching out to get more support or like being more observant about how I'm talking to myself, about myself, whatever it is, like I feel like sometimes our growth has a lot to do with how much we're willing to support ourselves through that growth and not abandon ourselves in the growth. That makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I love the question that you asked. How did you say it again? If I were my friend.
Oh, if I were my friend, how would I support myself, or how would I support a friend that was trying to do what I was trying to do?
In coaching, we call that an under the radar question. It allows you to slide under the radar of that chattering internal voice of doubt and worry. That if you asked a question like, what support do I need right now? Or how am I going to do this? Or why isn't this working? Your mind will just go nuts. But if you ask it in this particular way, which is like, you know, if I were my friend, or if I were supporting a friend who is going through something like this, what would I want to do? You kind of slide under that whole thing, and you can actually look at what would be really important to do. So, trouble at the border. 3 important things to take away about this. Bless you. I invite you to consider in the moments, going forward when you see you're at trouble at the border, that being at trouble at the border is a sign that something is going right, not that something is going wrong. You know what I mean? That how often do we think, shit's going wrong right now? You know? Something wrong with this situation, something wrong with my goal, something wrong with me, something wrong with whatever. And that actually the fact that you are experiencing trouble at the border with the normal natural pushback and that discomfort that's just inherent to trouble at the border, the fact that you're experiencing that is actually a sign that something is going right. That you're at the border and you're on your way to bringing something into physical reality. And this is just how it looks for everyone, for every single person. It's normal and it's natural. It's not unusual. You're not unnatural. This is just the norm. This is just how it is. And finally, everyone goes through it. Latoya, did you say I'm not alone? Is that, yeah. You really aren't. You really aren't alone. Even when it feels like just the worst, you know, or the hardest, or the biggest, or the most insurmountable, you're having the normal, natural experience of having dreams that you are going for. So, what did I want to do next with this? So, looking at the playing field for a second, this is where the job search happens. And what I want to highlight is where some things map onto it. So in the job search, you might have a lot of ideas about what to do. I'd like to apply to this place. I'd like to apply to this place. Wouldn't it be great if I had a job like this? I wonder if I could work in San Francisco. What if I was in San Mateo? What if I was in this? you notice how quickly those ideas can kind of come, and they're a little bit lighter because they're in visionary reality. I clicked submit on the application that contained a PDF of my resume and my cover letter. Where does that happen? Physical reality. That is sure as shit in physical reality. And you notice the difference that as I was describing that, couldn't you tell that, I am clicking submit on the application form that has my PDF of my cover letter? Can't you tell that that takes energy? You can imagine the energy it would take to write up the cover letter and turn it into a PDF and save it to your drive, and then you got to do this other stuff. One of the things that happens to just about everybody in a job search is we hang out too much in visionary reality. It's possible actually to hang out too much in physical reality, whether it's a job search or anything else. If you are hanging out too much in physical reality without connecting with the visionary reality, it's easy to get burnt out because your action is just for action's sake, rather than being attached to an idea or an intention, a goal, a dream, what you see to be your purpose. So that can happen. But by and large, in the job search, the thing that happens with most of us is we hang out for quite a while in visionary reality, and then we'll dip our toe into physical reality and submit an application, and then 5 days go by, or 6 days go by, or 2 weeks go by, or however long, and we're thinking about all the things we need to do, and we're thinking, oh, I should read up on hash maps, and I should do this, and I should do that. But the main metric, the important metric of a job search is how many applications you're sending in. And I put applications in quotes because sometimes it is literally going to be, there's an application on a site and you attach your resume and you click submit. And sometimes it's going to be, I send my resume to the friend who's a friend of the CEO, and that person has agreed to forward it on. That counts, because you're taking an action in physical reality that represents you doing what is yours to do in this process to get this job, at least that first step. There's a lot in the job search process that is not in your control. But reaching out and applying or sending your resume by email or whatever, that is within your control. Now, please don't freak out about this. I can see in your eyes right now, there's this kind of like, ugh. Have some compassion for yourself that this job search really is an experience of being at trouble at the border. And then just be attentive to how am I doing when it comes to the physical reality part of my job search. I may have done a lot of good reading. I may have a lot of ideas for where to apply. I may have made some lists of places to apply. When was the last time I sent in a job application? How many did I send in? Have I sent one in every day? And you will get extraordinary results. I virtually promise you this. You will get extraordinary results in your job search if you are taking consistent action every single day. And that consistent action can't just be studying. It can't just be preparing. Because again, the main, I see some nods. The main important, relevant thing in physical reality for a job search is when you have reached out to someone. Because you could spend 6 years preparing, and you're never going to get a job until you actually ask someone, can I have a job? Yeah? People following this? Yeah, good. So speaking of consistent action, so the best way to cross trouble at the border without a train wreck, small, sweet steps. Steps that are small, sweet,
And step-like.
and step-like. Thank you. Have you noticed that sometimes we go to take action and we try to take some giant leap? It's like, man, I'm going to do this, and in order to do this, the only way that this is going to work is if I send in 25 applications today, you know? Or I've got to redo my whole resume, and I'm going to do it, you know, I'm going to get it done today, which is, you know, we know how long resumes take to get and to review and all of that. It's easy to have a train wreck when you are trying to take some enormous step, and you're much more likely to be successful if you are defining, if you're setting and taking small, sweet steps. So what do I mean by small, sweet steps? By 2 p.m. today, I complete 1 algorithm challenge from cracking the coding interview. You notice that it's small, it's discrete, you know, it's sweet, has a little bit of sweetness to it. It's not, I complete 20 algorithm challenges. It's also not, I do some algorithms. Because when we say to ourselves, I do some algorithms, all of a sudden there's this imperative to be doing stuff, but we haven't actually defined for ourselves how much we want to do. So we might do half an algorithm, or we might do 4, and you'll still have this feeling of, I maybe didn't do enough, right? Because you could always do more. So small, sweet, specific steps. By 4 p.m. tomorrow, I submit my application to Slack, or insert company here. So small, sweet, discrete. And this would only be the right small, sweet step if your resume was already in good shape. And, you know, if your cover letter just needed to be, you know, tweaked. Otherwise, the action would be by, you know, 10 a.m. this morning, I make a revision of my cover letter. This is going to give you the best chance to cross the border with some ease. Any questions on small, sweet steps? This is big stuff, you know? Did you feel the energy dip in the space when I started talking about small, sweet steps? Did you notice that? That before the energy was kind of high, and then all of a sudden when we're talking about physical reality, things just kind of, woo. It's normal. It's normal. Any questions about this? A job search comprised of a series of small, sweet steps will have the greatest chance for some real ease to it. You know, consistent steps. So I want to talk about something to kind of round out the lecture this morning, the talk, called deliberate practice. And some of this is stuff that I have thought about in particular in preparing for algorithms, but also in music. I'm a drummer and percussionist, and have spent, you know, a long time, many thousands of hours, I'm sure, in the practice room, practicing over and over and over again. And that's what we're talking about when it comes to algorithms. You know, it's not so much I learn some abstract concepts. Like, you may need to learn an abstract concept or two, you know, how a hash map works or something like that. But the real stuff of preparing to succeed in an interview with algorithms is doing it, practicing. So deliberate practice is some stuff that I've thought about. I actually have to credit my older brother. He graduated college with a physics degree, went on to get a master's in electrical engineering, but for the better part of his life has had the goal, the dream, to be a professional percussionist, a timpanist in a major world orchestra. And 10, 12 years ago, he was living in Chicago and working full-time at a nanotech job where he was literally building machines that could write on a nano scale. He actually, I don't know if this is documented anywhere, but he holds the record for having drawn the smallest Homer Simpson ever, because he used this tool to draw, and it's like 1/1000th of a human hair or something like that, this picture of Homer's face. And for a while, he was practicing to take auditions and just not having much luck. And he was starting to get kind of burnt out. And he has written now about a change that happened where he went from the kind of practicing he was doing before to what he calls deliberate practice, where he was, I'll go more into this, but he was very deliberate about what he was doing, when he was doing it, how much he was doing. And for years and years and years, put in this energy into deliberate practice. And then now, it's actually been a while. It's 4 or 5 years ago, won the timpani audition for the Metropolitan Opera in New York. And has been doing that for the last 4 or 5 years. And, quit his job at the nanotech company, is now living the dream. And part of what he sees his purpose to be is to help people dispel the notion that there are some people that are just innately talented at things, like music, like, oh, that person's just gifted at music. Or that being really good at something requires one specific kind of training. There's a huge bias in especially the kind of classical music industry about having gone to conservatory. You really, the people that are taking auditions, I'd say by and large are people who went to college and majored in music and then went to conservatory and just, worked their asses off. And he did not. His undergrad degree was not even music. And so he sees it as his kind of mission to dispel the fact that you have to be innately talented in order to get really good at something. He says, no, it just takes deliberate practice. And I can show you my charts. I can show you my spreadsheets from when I would sit down in the practice room, and I would have already identified, here are the 3 things that I'm weakest on. And I'm going to spend 45 minutes on this, and I'm going to spend 20 minutes on this, and I'm going to spend this, and I'm going to record myself and listen back to the recordings. There's a kind of method to it. It's methodical. You don't have to do that to get good at algorithms. You don't have to spend 10 years to do it. So you can breathe a little easier. But I do want to share a few of the kind of principles of deliberate practice that I think will really help in honing your ability here. So be methodical. And in particular, the method that's really important here is action. So take an action like I solve an algorithm challenge from Cracking the Coding Interview, Chapter 2, problem 2.2. Review what happened. Debrief what happened. Reflect on it. What went well? What didn't go well? Where do I see my strengths are? Where was I weakest? And then based on what you have reviewed, based on what you have reflected upon, make a adjustment to your course. So if up until then you had been focusing more on trees, and you say, oh, well, the tree part of this was super easy, where I got really stuck was in async promises or something. Then you adjust your plan so that you're spending time on async promises. There's something kind of, There's something inherently uncomfortable about a process like this where you are choosing to focus on where you're weakest. I don't know how many musicians there are in the group. Musicians, yeah. Have you ever noticed that sometimes when you go into the practice room, it can be very tempting to work on the parts you're already good at? You know, you play the first part of the piece, you know, through the second page that you've already played 40 times. And that second page, which has largely been neglected, you don't spend very much time on. Who knows why we do this? I don't have any idea why we do this. But
it's much more satisfying to like do something well than something poorly.
Well, right, and it's inherently uncomfortable to say, where am I weakest on this, and let me zero in on that. And yet, whether it's algorithms or whether it's anything else, you will get the greatest benefit by putting your energy where you need to grow the most. Yeah, Hannah?
It's also difficult to learn something new, especially when you feel like you have a certain piece of it down. And so then like moving on to the part that you don't know, it's like this contrast that becomes really frustrating to get through.
Yes, absolutely. So focus on your weaknesses. You're methodical, and in your reflection, you're asking this question: where am I weakest? Really, when I look at this algorithm, I did great on that, but what happened that didn't go the way I wanted it? Or where, if this was an interview, what would someone pick out as a place that I didn't do as well? Measure your performance. And I'm going to talk about how to do that with algorithms in a minute. But measuring yourself is so crucial to know when you're improving. You know, because for investing all the time and energy, it's kind of a bummer if you don't ever have a sense that you're improving. And this gives you a good bar for where am I at with this.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
What's some kind of like criteria that you can have when you think you need to measure your performance? Like, and what kind of aspects of it? Is it using time or using speed or I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, time is a really important one. Algorithm challenges in interviews, this is my take on it, are not meant to be a speed test per se. But I've heard it again and again that if a company interviews 2 people in a day and one person got an algorithm challenge and they solved it in 45 minutes and another person got it and they solved it in 15, there's just something inherently clearer about the person's capacity. You know, that person who solved it in 15, you know, they did really well. There could be all sorts of other things about this person, but especially in a world of interviews that are not always that accurate, that are not always like perfect assessments of your ability and your culture fit and all of that. You know, we've talked about this, that interviews can be biased and they can lead to a lot of false negatives. It's important to be able to do the task in an efficient way. So time is a really good one. You know, one other question is, did I solve it? Not only did I solve it, but did I solve it in the time complexity that's most optimal? So I get the sense that probably some or most folks know about time complexity, this big O notation. And if you don't, you know, I can talk with you about it, folks can talk with you about it. But that's another metric of how good your algorithm is how does it perform given different inputs. Pretty good? And this might be a kind of gnarly and weird one for some of us. Listen to and or watch yourself. So this is the thing that my older brother did. One of the things that he cites as truly the most, like one of the most important things that he did in the whole process was not only did he sit in the practice room and play and play and play, but then he had a video camera set up, and he would go back and he would watch the recordings, and he would see things that he didn't notice when he was in the moment doing it. You know, have you ever noticed this? Have you ever seen a video of yourself and you've thought like, oh, I didn't know I do that. I didn't know I speak that way, or I didn't, yeah.
I'll go worse. You'd be like, who is this person?
Mm-hmm.
It ain't me.
You know, how do I? So you know that Macs, come on, have, you know, there are plenty of apps to do this, but QuickTime Player, you can do File, Spinning Wheel of Death. You can do File, New Screen Recording, and you can do a recording that has your screen and has your voice on it. I think you can also do a video recording from the webcam.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it was just right up there. Yeah, new movie recording. So it's a quick and easy way to do it. And I guarantee you will see not just things to improve, but really important things to improve in your performance when it comes to algorithms, solving these problems, if you watch yourself. You know? You might find that you solved the algorithm perfectly in 12 minutes flat, no hitches. It's the first time you'd ever seen it. And every time you spoke, you had about 40 ums in what you were saying. And you'll notice how distracting it is and how much something like that might impact someone who's sitting next to you, you know, evaluating you. And again, for as uncomfortable as it is, because this is a trouble at the border moment too, making a change with that can have a really big benefit. So listen to and or watch yourself. Yeah, Alex.
For listening and watching yourself practicing algorithms, would you recommend a mix of like both whiteboarding and solving in a code editor?
I don't claim to be an authority on this. I think Cam in particular, but probably others might be able to tell you a little more definitively on this. My experience has been that whiteboarding is not super common anymore. I don't think I don't know. In the job search before Learners Guild, I don't think I was asked once to do whiteboarding. I have noticed there's this sense that it's a good idea to give developers a chance to work in their own coding environment on a computer where you actually code, and give them a chance to solve a problem there, rather than doing something on a whiteboard that you'll never do in your job. You know. So my own sense of this, and where I know I will be directing my energy, is like probably 90% towards working on the computer, and maybe 10% towards whiteboarding. In particular, because whiteboarding might just be a change of pace that helps you learn new things about your approach, you know, how you're doing. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. So deliberate practice in practice. No laughs, no laughs. Oh. I thought it was really funny when I was. So here is a sample deliberate practice plan. And you'll want to be a little more specific than this in your planning. This is not altogether different from work planning, by the way. You know, you're defining where you're headed, what you're doing, how you're going to do it. But just as an example, what this looks like in real life. So I sit down and I look over the different kinds of algorithm challenges in, for example, Cracking the Coding interview. They have, you know, everything from trees and graphs to bit manipulation to arrays and brain teasers and all of that. So I look over those different ones and I make a plan to drill the ones that I'm weaker on. So I say, okay, I have done a lot of string manipulation and I'm really doing just fine on that. You know, that's page 1 of the piano etude. Where I'm quite a bit weaker is when it comes to trees. You know, if somebody asked me to do a depth first search, I would just, you know, I wouldn't know what to do, even though I kind of know what a depth first search is. So that's where you put down trees, and maybe under that you put depth first search. So you're identifying where am I going to get the greatest bang for my buck in terms of time and energy investment when it comes to algorithms. Because, you know, one of the reasons that I'm talking to you about this is because I know that at the end of the day, you want to get the most bang for your buck when it comes to the time you're putting into algorithms. You don't want to have to put in, you know, 100 hours of algorithm practice and not get really good at the things you need to get good at. And so it's zeroing in on where do I go. I will say, it's also been my experience that some types of algorithm challenges are more common than others in interviews. And so especially for junior positions, the less common ones might be like bit manipulation. You know, it's kind of arcane. We don't do a ton of bit manipulation anymore, especially in JavaScript world. And a much more common one is something like string parsing. So you want to be attentive to that. You know, system design for a junior dev is going to be a little less common, but it's quite possible that you will get a system design question like design a URL shortener. This is one I've literally been asked like 4 or 5 times, is design a URL shortener. So you have to talk about the system. So it's like Bitly. How do I design the system? I have a server, I have a front-end interface. The server has some routes for this. You know, I get a URL in that needs to be shortened. I return to this, that sort of thing. You're mapping out the whole system. Not super common for a junior dev, but still worth practicing a few of them. So make a plan to drill the ones you're weaker on and block out time to practice on the calendar. I know for myself that this is pretty important. If it's not on my calendar, it tends to not happen. So looking at your day and saying, okay, I've got a block of time from 2 to 3. I'm going to do 3, you know, I'm going to do 1 algorithm challenge or 2 algorithm challenges during that time. And then do it. This is the action step. You know, time yourself. So this is to Amin's question, and I'll show you my example of this in a second. When you're doing algorithm challenges, very important to time yourself. Again, not because speed is the most important thing, but because it gives you a metric for how well you're doing. You might be surprised that you took an hour and a half to solve an algorithm challenge. I was actually surprised when I looked back at some of the examples of times when I had timed myself. I was actually surprised. I was like, wow, I spent, you know, an hour and 10 minutes on this one. And that's too long for, you know, the kind of algorithm challenges that you're going to be doing in an interview. So I was surprised even myself looking back at this. So do it, time yourself. And this is one in particular, ask friends to observe you. You've got a whole crew of buddies here at the Guild who would probably be glad to help you with this and who would probably get a lot out of watching you, frankly. And so the ask is, will you observe me doing an algorithm challenge? Will you kind of proctor an algorithm challenge and then give me feedback on how I did? What did you notice? What did I mess up? Was I saying a lot of ums? That sort of thing. And then at the end of the week, so this might be a weekly plan, at the end of the week, review your performance. I wanted to focus on trees and, what was it, trees and brain teasers. How many did I do? You know, just tell the truth, facts on the ground. How many did I do? I did 4 of this and I did 1 of those. Great. did I do what I said I would do? Well, I said I would do 6 and 5. So no, I didn't. And that's just what it is. There's no interpretation needed. And then you can make a plan for next week. It's like, okay, this one took longer than I was expecting. So I'm going to shoot for 4 and 2 next week. It's very important here to just report the facts. Very often when we ask our mind, how did I do, we get an interpretation. You know, you didn't do very well, is what your mind will say. Or, I don't know, you did some challenges and, you know, it went pretty well and I feel pretty good about it. That's not the facts. That's an interpretation. So just report the facts. Did I do what I said I would do? How many did I do? How long did it take me? Just the kind of concrete stuff. And that'll keep you from that, what do they call it? Analysis paralysis. Have you heard about this? Where you're just stuck in that loop of like, why did I do this? And why did I do that? And why am I asking these questions? And why, you know. Oh, I don't think I want that. Okay, so this is an example of something that I did. And I hope you can see this. Can you see this okay? I can zoom in a little bit. Whew. So I sat down, I made a file. This is going to be in Python, by the way. I made a file, cracking the coding interview question 4.1. I write out the question, and here's where I start my solution. So I mark the time that I'm starting, and so it's kind of my way of doing a stopwatch. I just say I started at 5:40, and then when I end at 6:20, I can calculate the time. Go away, thing at the bottom. How do I make you go away? Okay, good. So what I did here is instead of, so who knows about algorithm challenges like this in interviews, it's important to vocalize as you're doing these challenges. You don't want to be silent the entire time, right? Do people know this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was my biggest, like, with the change to the interview to have multiple learners, is that we can't talk out loud.
Mm.
So, yeah, it's very important to be able to do that.
Take it up with management. Yes, it is a good skill to have. You don't need to be narrating every single thought that you have. But think about if you were in the interviewer's shoes, you want to have something to interact with. You know, you want to have a sense of what this person is talking about, what this person is about to do. Because in particular, a lot of interviewers have enough compassion to, if you say something that indicates you have misunderstood the problem, they might, and are not obligated to, they might say, you might want to rethink that, or, you know, look at the question again, or that's not what the question is asking, right? So it can save you sometimes. So in this case, I was just writing it out, kind of my thought process. Usually I would actually be speaking out loud. So, okay, here's my idea. Oh, shoot. Here's my idea. Find the center of the array, make that the head node, then find the center of each side, let that be the left and right nodes, okay, and so on. So I'm thinking out my basic solution, the kind of initial way I want to, and I say, okay, you could write this recursively, so it's going to da-da-da, and so I'm going through the process and writing it down. Next page, I'm continuing. So here's my kind of pseudocode. I think I want to do this, you know, create a minimal tree, and here's what it's going to look like. It's not actually complete code, but it's just, you know, scribbling. Does this guarantee minimal height? Okay, great. So I'm not sure. So you see what I'm doing? I'm narrating the relevant thoughts here. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking, so I have a sense at the end, how long did it take me to come to an actual solution of this? At the bottom, okay, I think this should just take O of n times, since the function is only called for members of the array plus 1 to 2 extra times. So you're doing the big O analysis. I'm sure there's a way to do this iteratively that minimizes the space, but da-da-da. So then I end at this time, and I had a pause in there. Debrief. This was great. Whiteboarding. And so this is actually an example of one where I had written this all out, but I was actually writing on paper the solution. This was great. Whiteboarding like this, just writing plain text, no highlighting, no linting, no completions, was not that hard. I'm fairly confident in this solution and my analysis. I'm glad I looked to verify whether it was really a binary search tree, because that clarified for me the definition. This is important. Make sure you get the question right. And at the end, when you're checking your work, you can say, did I get the question right, or did I maybe have a misunderstanding about it? Shit, I forgot that doing a slice in JavaScript takes O of n time. So while the solution is nice and clean, it actually takes n cubed time, which is just the worst. That is really bad. This is just a hint. When you're using built-in functions in JavaScript, like built-in methods for arrays and whatever else, you need to be conscious of their time complexity, because your code might look like it's big O of n, when actually you're using things that blow up the time complexity. Mistakes. I forgot the cost of Python list slices and how that can jack up the time complexity. Remember, slices are convenient, but when designing algorithms, it's always going to be more efficient to keep track of pointers. So that was my debrief. That was my reflection, taking a lesson out of what I did. Any questions about this? This has been a lot of information. I've just been kind of throwing information at you the last 10 minutes. So any questions, thoughts? Is this useful? Can you imagine doing this yourself in a kind of methodical way?
Yeah, I mean, the last part is pretty much what you have in your brain.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You always can go back to it, instead of keeping it in your head.
Especially the debrief, I will almost always write out, because it's just useful for me. Even reading this, the mistakes, line 57, even reading this right now, it's a helpful reminder to me. When do I want to use built-in functions? When do I want to write the loop myself? This is one of my favorite cartoons ever. Have you seen this? On the top, it's your plans. And on the bottom, it's the universe's plans for you. You can see right here, you think you're going to go over here, and then there's a big dip with some rocks, and then there's this, and I forget where it is. It's I thought there was a shark in one of these. Anyway, one of my favorite cartoons that illustrates what it's like to be on the playing field and to do all of this. That's it. So let me just ask, any questions overall about what we talked about at the beginning, the algorithm process? Let me actually ask a different question. What is one thing you are taking away from this for yourself? Trouble at the border.
Yeah, that. But that's not a bad thing.
That it's not a bad thing.
Think that you're not alone. Talk about it. Yeah. And
Yep. Trouble at the border, not a bad thing.
probably specific, deliberate practice.
Specific, deliberate practice. Okay.
I like those two.
Uh-huh. Those two.
Actually, are you gonna post that?
Yeah, I can post this. Yep. Yep. We'll hear from just one or two more. Something you're taking away.
Deliberate practice.
Deliberate practice. What about deliberate practice?
I mean, just I can only rephrase what you said. I think it's to me a way to just make sure what you're doing what you're intending to be doing, and it's kind of another way of saying mindful too, but more spelled out.
Yeah, that you're doing. Did everybody hear that? That you're doing. It's deliberate practice is a way to do what you are actually intending to do, and it has this mindful component to it. Thanks. Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.